Hey, it's Janelle Waz and welcome back to another video. You may remember a video a while ago where I cleaned my old Sega Genesis controller, and ever since then I wanted to do another electronics cleaning video. I don't know, there's just something so soothing about cleaning my old electronics. I've been playing my PS2 lately and noticed that my start button was a little picky, so I figure, why not clean it and show everyone? So, same as before, I'll show you how I clean my PS2 controller. Now, I'm not an expert, and I've only really cracked open a PS2 controller a couple of times, so if you happen to have any tips or tricks to improve my method, please leave a comment and share your knowledge. I want to learn, and anyone else who wants to spruce up their controller might also want to learn as well. So, let's get started. Alright, first things first, what will you need for this project? Well, for one thing, you'll need a PS2 controller. Gotta have something to clean, am I right? You will also need 91% isopropyl alcohol. Now, I have gotten away with using 72% in the past, but honestly, you're better off using a higher percentage isopropyl alcohol. If you can get your hands on 91% isopropyl alcohol, do it. It'll dry a lot faster than the 72%. You'll also need a jar or cup to hold the isopropyl alcohol. Nothing fancy, I'm using an old jar that some yogurt came in. You'll also need a crap ton of Q-tips. Believe me, you'll need a lot for both cleaning and drying. You will also need a Phillips head screwdriver. I have this nice screwdriver set with different size heads, but you don't need to get fancy. Even something like this will work. I also have a towel on my work area. Personally, I like working on top of a towel so the screws don't roll around and to protect the table I'm working on, but that's just me. You'll also need stuff for washing the plastic pieces. I used an old toothbrush to get into the crevices of the controller, and I had a washcloth on hand. And of course, a dish towel for drying. Drying's very important in this project, don't forget it. Okay, we got everything we need. Let's crack this thing open. The PS2 controller is held together by 6 screws in the back. Simply unscrew them with the Phillips head screwdriver. It helps to have a magnetized screwdriver so the screws come out easier, but if they're stubborn and don't want to come out, pulling the controller apart after you unscrew them will loosen them from the case. Ah, there we go. And now for the big reveal. Behold, the inside of a PS2 controller. Let's take a look at all the little plastic pieces and set them off to the side for later. I popped out the directional pad out of the top case, and you can see the directional pad has 3 parts. The hard directional pad buttons, this thing, yeah, I don't know what it is, but I'm sure it's important, so don't lose it, and the soft button pad. There are also the classic PlayStation buttons, circle, triangle, square. Hey, where's X? Ah, there it is. And the single soft button pad for the 4 buttons. There is also the soft select, start, and analog button. There's no hard buttons for these, it's all in one soft piece. Let's pop out the guts of the controller while we're at it. And there's the back of the case. Set that off to the side for later. There are also the plastic joystick caps that just pop off. I suppose I could replace these, but I don't have the replacements, so I'm just using the originals. Replacements are cheap enough if I want to replace them down the road, but these are good enough for me. The L and R1 buttons slid out of the top of the case during dismantling, while the L and R2 buttons are in the bottom part of the case. The L2 and R2 buttons do come out, but I left them in for the time being, mostly because I thought they were set in the case. I'll talk more about this later, it does come up when you're putting everything back together. Let's get those screws out of the way and look how the controller is set up on the inside. There's 2 parts of the board. The bottom has the analog joysticks, and the top has a soft, thin plastic board, for lack of a better word, on a hard plastic base. The rumble packs are also set into the hard plastic base. If you look on the other side of the board, you'll notice soft pads for the L and R buttons, which can be removed for cleaning. With the plastic pieces off to the side, let's start cleaning the board. Break out the isopropyl alcohol. Take a Q-tip, dip it in the alcohol, and wipe the excess off on the side of the jar. You don't want too much liquid for this. And then start cleaning the contacts. In other controllers, the contacts are metal contacts, but here they're built into the plastic and are the little black rectangles. I didn't get a whole lot of junk off the contacts, which isn't a bad thing. I remember cleaning the controller a few years ago, so not a whole lot should be here. We're just sprucing the contacts up. I also went ahead and cleaned around the joysticks, and managed to clean a little bit of dirt away. I wasn't having any issues with the joysticks, but I'll sleep better knowing the joysticks are clean. I also flipped over the board and cleaned the rumble packs. I also managed to remove a small piece of spiral notebook paper. What assignment that was used on, I can't begin to guess. And let's get the L and R button contacts. And while we're at it, let's get the other side of the rumble packs. Not too shabby. Okay, it's bath time for the little plastic pieces. Just some warm water and dish soap is enough, nothing fancy. And then just start washing the pieces. Any plastic, non-electrical components can be washed. Like I said, I use an old toothbrush to really get into the crevices and scrub them out. It'll also come in handy for any engraved lettering on the buttons, like the L and R buttons. And if the toothbrush isn't cutting it, you can use a Q-tip. You'll definitely want to get into the tight crevices of the directional button. Not that you can see it from the outside, but if you're going to go through the trouble of cleaning the plastic components, you might as well do a good job. Wash the hard plastic pieces, wash the soft plastic button pads, give the pieces a nice scrubbing. Especially those PlayStation buttons. Who knows how many times those buttons were pressed? And then rinse the plastic pieces in some clean water, making sure the pieces are clean and the soap is rinsed off. And now we dry the pieces like you're drying your fine china. I use a dish towel to soak up any moisture, but of course a towel isn't going to cut it for the smaller crevices, so you'll want to use your Q-tips to get in there and absorb any hard to reach water. I found the bottom part of the case had the most places for water to hide. Some of the buttons had tight crevices that I couldn't even reach with a Q-tip. Just do your best and try to dry as much water as you can. Nice freshly clean pieces. I also left the pieces to air dry for about 10 minutes just to make sure. You want to avoid putting the controller back together with wet pieces. Now, I suppose I could have washed the screws in the bath, but I just took a little rubbing alcohol and cleaned them that way. Now let's do a little roll call. You should have 6 screws, 2 case pieces, that is 1 top and 1 bottom, 2 joystick caps, the R and L buttons, that is 2 1 buttons and 2 2 buttons if you took them out of the bottom, the Start Select Analog Soft button, a hard directional pad button, that crisscross directional button thingy, a directional button soft pad, the 2 L and R soft pads, the 4 PlayStation hard buttons, and a single soft button pad for the PlayStation buttons. Before we go any further, let's give the cord a quick wipe with some isopropyl alcohol. Again, this is probably the best way I know of to clean the cord, but if you have any suggestions, please leave a comment. Alright, with the controller cleaned inside and out, let's put it back together. First things first, you'll want to put the L and R soft button pads back on the controller. If you look at the soft pad, you'll notice a little pointed notch. This fits into a hole in the soft plastic board so you don't accidentally put the button pad in the wrong way. Just pop the pads in place, making sure the spike goes through the hole and the middle plastic tab goes through the middle of the pad. And of course repeat it for the other side. Here's an idea of how the button pads will fit on the controller as I put the joystick caps in. The caps have a shaped hole so you can put them in correctly and should just pop right in. You can press down until you hear the click of the R3 button in the joystick to know that they're in properly. Alright, now let's get the buttons into the top part of the controller. I put the Start Select Analog soft button into the middle of the controller first, fitting the individual buttons into their respective holes. Then I placed the Hard Directional Pad button into its hole and the PlayStation buttons into their slot. The PlayStation buttons have tabs of varying size that prevent you from putting the buttons in incorrectly. Just keep rotating the buttons in their slot until they drop in all the way. Now let's put the soft pads in. Put the soft pad in for the PlayStation buttons, matching the hole in the middle with the middle peg. I fit the crisscross thing for the directional pad over the soft button pad and put them in on top of the hard directional button. The crisscross thing should be sandwiched between the hard button and the soft button pad. There is a shorter arm that allows for a screw hole, so keep that in mind when putting that part in. If you're looking at the middle part, the flattened head should be facing up, which allows the button pad to fit. Now, I ended up doing quite a bit of trial and error for putting the whole thing back together. I would put the controller back together and then found out the R and L buttons just wouldn't work. This is because the contact and contact pads would often get folded when I was putting everything back together, meaning that pressing the button wouldn't do anything. I put the controller back together and took it apart so many times before I finally realized the easiest and quickest way of putting it back together. So to save you the headache, heartache, and whatever ache that may ail you, here is the easiest way to put together a PS2 controller. Here we have 3 pieces, the top with all the pieces inside, the bottom, and the guts of the controller. Now remember when I mentioned the L and R2 buttons? The buttons pop out of the bottom of the case, which becomes necessary to make sure the L and R pads and contacts are seated correctly. So let's push those buttons out and put this thing back together. Carefully plop the guts of the controller into the top part of the controller, fitting the analog joysticks into their respective holes. Once the guts are set, plop the L and R1 buttons into place, making sure the 1 is in the correct position. Once that's all settled, pop the bottom of the case on. Notice that the R and L button pads are shown in the back. They're looking pretty good so far, so I'm going to go ahead and screw 1 screw in for some stability. And then before I pop the L and R2 buttons in, I'm going to check to confirm the contacts and button pads are laying correctly. Yep, looks pretty good. Just pop the L and R2 buttons in the case. Give a couple of test presses to make sure everything feels okay, and screw the other screws into place. And there we go, a clean PS2 controller. Now let's test it out. Well, I think I call that a success. And that's how I took apart and cleaned my PS2 controller. Some trial and error and a couple of frustrating moments, but once I figured out the easiest way to put it back together, it went pretty well. Let me know if you want to see more videos like this, or if you have any tips to better clean a PS2 controller. As always, thanks for tuning into my video. If you like what you see, why not give my video a like and subscribe to my channel? Tell your friends! Until next time...
Ensign, are you blind? Or are you trying to sabotage engineering by wasting my time?